Take a breath and settle in. Welcome to Metaphysics at the Movies, the podcast where film meets deeper meaning and every scene becomes a doorway to insight. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing someone who doesn't just watch movies, he reads them. Reverend Rich P. is a Unity minister, speaker, and teacher of practical spirituality, known for blending real-life wisdom with metaphysical truth in a way that's grounded, accessible, and powerful. Around here, it's not just about what's happening on the screen. It's about what's happening within us as we watch. So whether it's drama, comedy, or action, Reverend Rich P. helps us uncover the spiritual principles, the hidden patterns, and the deeper messages woven into the stories we love. Get ready to see movies differently, and maybe even see yourself differently too. Let's get into it.
Welcome back to Metaphysics at the Movies, the podcast where we go beyond entertainment and uncover the spiritual lessons hidden inside the stories we watch. I'm Rev Rich P, and today we're stepping into one of the most emotional and spiritually challenging movie we've talked about yet, The Shack. Now, take a breath for a moment, because this movie's not really about a shack in the woods. It's about the hidden places inside us, the places where grief lives, the places where anger sits quietly, the places where we stop asking questions because the pain felt too heavy. And let's be real, everybody has a shack. For some people, it's heartbreak. For some people, it's disappointment. For some people, it's church hurt, family wounds, betrayal, guilt, or the moment life stops making sense. This is why this movie hits so deeply. It forces us to confront the images of God, love, forgiveness, and ourselves that we shaped by the pain instead of the truth. Today, we're going to explore that metaphysical lessons hidden throughout the story and discover what happens when divine love enters the places we thought were too broken to heal. So grab your tea, grab your coffee, your journal, or that snack you said you were going to eat, but Spirit is still working on you about. Let's go to the shack. And as always, as a quick warning, if you haven't watched the movie and don't want to learn about the spoilers, go ahead and pause the podcast and then come back to it after watching the movie. Or if you don't mind the spoilers, go ahead and stay here with me as we continue through the shack and watch it afterwards. Trust me, no matter how many spoilers you get here, you're going to watch the movie for yourself, because that's how the metaphysical meanings come to you. And what's more powerful about this, I actually know someone who told me that they read the book prior to the movie being released, and it literally changed their lives because it taught them so many lessons. So I'm not going to give you any of those lessons. I want you to go out and make your own. But let's go ahead and talk about the ones that I know from the movie. So let's start with our metaphysical lessons from The Shack. So let's do number 1. The shack represents the inner consciousness. Metaphysically, the shack symbolizes that hidden inner world where unresolved pain and suppressed emotions are stored. Mac is not simply returning to a physical location, he's returning to that consciousness built around trauma. And that's important because many people never heal from their trauma. They just learn how to function around the wound. Many of you know that I went ahead and I became a trauma-informed coach for that same reason. I heard such a powerful lesson when somebody told me that trauma is not what happened to you, but the stories we keep telling ourselves over and over. And as we continue to replay it, we continue to analyze it. Then we begin to have what we call trauma adaptive behavior, where we continue to relive the trauma in our minds, but then we create protection. We're not going to say it's anything bad. It's really a survival mode around it. So in this case, the shack represents that part of us that still relives, that trauma in our mind, and we create adaptive behavior behind that. Well, we know that unity teaches that consciousness shapes experience. What remains buried internally eventually influences relationships, decisions, emotions, and even spiritual beliefs. The shack, again, represents that guilt left unprocessed, the shame that's left unnamed, anger left unresolved, and stories we keep replaying about ourselves. And here's the lesson. Healing begins when we become willing to enter the places we usually avoid. Not to stay trapped there, but to bring light there. Because spirit cannot transform what we refuse to acknowledge. That's the work. In many cases, a lot of times, we also call that the shadow work. That darkness within us that we don't want to look at. But once we look at it and shine a light on it, we can begin to heal it. Call it the inner child. But I think that's what the shack represents in this movie for all of us. That shack that we're afraid to go into. Face what really happened, not what we're telling ourselves happened or what we've used other people in our lives to blame for things that are happening, but to truly face what happened, acknowledge it, come to terms with it, and work from it. Because you know what? No matter what, we can't change our past, but we can learn to forgive, to let go the anger and the story behind it, and begin to live from there. So that door to the shack is waiting for all of us, and that is the work. So let's go to metaphysical lesson number 2 here. God meets us in forms we can understand. So one of the biggest conversations around this movie is how God appears. But metaphysically, the form is not the point. The consciousness is. Spirit meets Mac in ways his heart can receive. Love becomes approachable. Wisdom becomes personal. Compassion becomes visible. And honestly, that's how divine presence often works in our lives. Sometimes God shows up as peace during chaos, wisdom from a stranger, a song at the right moment. How many of us has gone through that? A therapist, a deep breath before reacting, and unexpected grace during a hard season. Many people miss spiritual guidance because they expect it to arrive in one specific package. But infinite presence is creative. Unity teaches that God is not separate from life. Divine intelligence expresses through all things. The question becomes, are we paying attention to those signs? And that's what's important. When we talk about faith in action, it's about receiving that sign, hearing that sign, and even if we feel a bit afraid about that sign, we still move in faith knowing that we're being led somewhere. We're not trying to analyze it. We're not trying to do anything. As Mel Robbins used to say in the 5-second rule, we don't give it a chance to get that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And our mind starts telling us stories. We continue to move forward in faith, knowing that whatever the divine is to you, call it God, call it spirit, call it universe, doesn't matter. Whatever that divine speech that's coming in, that small, still voice that's coming in saying, hey, Rev Rich, head that way, do this. I know you're scared at the moment. I know you're nervous at the moment. I know you're suffering at the moment. But trust me, keep moving forward. When we listen to that and continue to move forward is where we begin to find that salvation. And we know and recognize that God presence within us. So metaphysical number 3 here, forgiveness releases the soul. Now, you know, I've written a whole journal on this, just on the forgiveness aspect. Just knowing that forgiveness is what opens up to allow us to do more in our lives. Now, when we talk about this movie, though, the movie does not treat forgiveness like a greeting card quote. It shows how difficult forgiveness really is. And that's what I appreciate about this movie, and the book is right behind that, is that it's not telling us that forgiveness is easy. Oh, let's just forgive, everything's good and dandy. No, it is difficult. especially when our ego, who's been taught that this is wrong and that is wrong and slapping labels on everything, and we're trying to forgive, and it keeps telling us, no, we shouldn't forgive because of that. But it isn't until we realize that forgiveness really isn't for the situation or the person. The forgiveness is for us to release that pain and to stop carrying that burden. So in the movie, Mac is carrying the pain so heavy that it shapes how he sees everything around him. And spiritually, that's what unforgiveness does. It binds consciousness to the very experience we're trying to escape. So now let's be clear, because I just said some of this, but I want to repeat myself. Forgiveness does not erase accountability. Forgiveness does not say pain was acceptable. Forgiveness does not mean that trust automatically returns. Forgiveness means, and I'm hoping you're listening closely here, I will no longer allow this pain to own my spirit. I think I need to repeat that. I will no longer allow this pain to own my spirit. And that's what true freedom is. There are still people who are physically in this year of 2026, but emotionally living in 1998. They're still angry about something. They're still replaying the same thing over and over in their head. They're still bleeding from moments nobody else remembers. And the truth is, carrying bitterness drains spiritual energy. And we know the quote from the Buddha that says, holding on to anger or unforgiveness for someone else is like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. So the movie reminds us that forgiveness is not weakness, it is spiritual release. So I hope you practice that. Find someone, something today. And trust me, don't start big. Start with something small in your life and say, hey, I need to choose forgiveness for me in this situation. Try it out. And as it becomes easier, start moving into bigger and bigger things. And as always, if you're looking for help, you're more than welcome to come to my website, schedule some time, find someone close to you, your own ministers, your own unity centers, things like that. Doesn't matter, just someone that you can speak to that can help you through this. And like I said, if you're like me and we tend to start behind the curtains, I do have a journal on my website, revrichp.com, that will help you with forgiveness in your life. I even have a version for the teens as well. So if you have any teenagers you know that need to learn forgiveness, check that journal out too. So that was my little plug there. Let's go ahead and go to number 4 here. And judgment distorts spiritual vision. One of the deepest scenes in the movie forces Mac to confront judgment. Suddenly, life no longer has simple categories of good and bad. He realizes how limited human perception really is. Now, I want you to think about that, because it doesn't matter what it is in life. We're always trying to label it somehow. Good, bad, evil, holy, whatever. You know, we're always trying to label it. But if we can go above, as Michael Stringer in his book, The Unfettered Soul, he talks about being the observer. When we become the observer and stop looking at it from his perspective or my perspective, but look at it for what it is, you'll notice that as humans, we love to limit the view and label it in some way, somehow. But metaphysically, judgment is rooted in separation consciousness. Ego wants labels because labels create certainty and control. But divine consciousness sees beyond the behavior into wounds, fears, conditioning, and potential. That does not remove responsibility, it deepens compassion. And honestly, some people extend more grace to strangers than they do to themselves. For some of you that know, I also do talks. I remember doing a talk one time where I asked the audience, I said, do me a favor, list the top 10 people you need to forgive right now. And I gave them a few minutes. I said, okay, everybody put their hands up that got 10 people. Pretty much everybody did. I said, okay, I want you to put your hand down if you are not on that list. Half the people put their hands down. And then I said, how many people have their name as number 1? There wasn't a hand up in the room. We would rather give grace to strangers than we do, and we end up beating ourselves up Take it from someone who lives this, gotten sick from it. It is the worst feeling in the world, and it's something you definitely want to work through. So the movie itself quietly asks us, what if you stop defining yourself by your worst moments? And then once you ask yourself that, we know that that question alone, just focusing on that question, can shift you into an entire healing journey. So let's go ahead and hit number 5 here. Pain can become identity if we are not careful. So the lesson here, this is a big one. Mac became emotionally shaped by tragedy. His pain influenced his relationships, his spirituality, and how he viewed life itself. And people do this every day. Sometimes people stop introducing themselves through possibility and start introducing themselves through pain. I'm the person who got hurt. I'm the person who failed. I'm the person who got abandoned. But metaphysically, your experiences are not your identity. You are a spiritual being having a human experience. You are still worthy, still divine, still connected to source. Trauma may explain behavior, but it does not define destiny. We have a choice. That's important to understand, that when we can get past that, our past may have shaped who we are today, and that's fine. We may have created adaptive behavior, thinking that if we act a certain way, we try to make people think we're a certain way, that it will influence, but it doesn't define who we can become. Because healing starts when we stop building our future around old wounds and start building it knowing that today is a new day. So let's go ahead and move into metaphysics lesson number 6 here. I know I usually try to do 5. Sometimes I'll add more. This time was a number 6 I think we have to talk about, which is love restore what fears tried to close. Let me repeat that. Love restores what fear tried to close. So by the end of the film, the greatest miracle is not external. The miracle is internal. Mac's heart begins to open again. His perception changes. His connection to life changes. And this is what we call metaphysical transformation. Fear had convinced him to close himself emotionally. How many of us have already done that? We stop going out. We stop doing things because we're so tired of being hurt, or we're so tired of feeling like we're failing. And like I said, we are our worst enemies. That fear of interaction, our fear of acting, that fear of setting standards and trying to live by it, we close ourselves off. And I'm not talking about the standards set by social media or by the television. I'm talking about the standards that we know when we listen to that small, still voice that we are able to do and continue to do. But then, as in the movie, love invited him back into relationship with life. When we begin to show that true love for ourselves, our true love for what we believe in, the true love, and work from a place of love to the relationships we do cultivate, we then turn back a relationship with life. And maybe that's the lesson somebody listening today needs most. You do not have to remain emotionally frozen because of what happened to you. Your heart can heal, your spirit can breathe again, and joy can return. No, it's not going to happen overnight, not even magically, but truthfully. Healing is truly possible if you choose to do the work, choose to accept it, and choose to do it from a place of love. So this week from the movies, in total, what I want you to carry with you. The shack is not a place where God abandoned you. The shack may actually be the place where healing begins. Sometimes the places we avoid most are the exact places where transformation is waiting. And maybe Spirit is not asking you to pretend you never hurt. Maybe Spirit is simply asking you to stop hurting alone. So let's just take a breath on that one. Because practical spirituality is not about escaping life. It's about allowing divine love to meet us fully inside. So this week, I want you to spend some quiet time asking yourself, what pain have I turned into identity? Not what happened to you, not who hurt you, not the story you tell everybody else. What have you unconsciously allowed to define how you see yourself? And then write it down. I'm always constantly saying the shortest pencil is better than the longest memory. Then next to it, write this question: what would I be without carrying this every day? And I want you to sit with that for a bit, maybe pray on it and journal with it. And if forgiveness comes up, don't force it. Just become willing to loosen your grip on the pain a little bit. So that's a hard lesson. It is a very powerful movie. And as I said, I know people who only read the book and felt that it helped change their lives. Because healing is not a performance. Healing is a process. So thank you for spending time with me here on Metaphysics with the Movies. Be sure to subscribe and share this episode with somebody who may need it. And remember, you are more than what hurts you. And what I want you to do, as always, is take that truth and walk with it. Peace and blessings, and so it is.
And just like that, the credits start to roll. But here's the truth. What you saw in the movie is already playing out in your life. So the question is, what are you choosing to believe? What role are you stepping into? And what truth are you ready to live? That's the work. If this episode spoke to you, don't just sit with it. Walk with it. Apply it. Live it. Let it move through you. And if you're ready to go deeper, more teachings, tools, journals, and ways to activate this in your everyday life, head over to revrichp.com. That's where the conversation continues. Until next time, keep watching, keep awakening, and take that truth and walk with it. Peace and blessings.